this is the other thing that we saw. In as much as we've seen like a wave of people, election deniers going into this space, we've also seen this kind of weird, negative, hostile creativity regarding the law flow into the space. And we've seen, state legislatures initiate a tidal wave of new laws or prospective new laws that would rework and kind of introduce this level of hyperpartisanship and doubt into our election system. And that's highlighted in a report that we've done, which is called Democracy Crisis in the Making, where we've chronicled well over 200 bills that have been introduced just this year. And also if you add in 2021, it's even more pieces of legislation that have been introduced across more than 30 states. And each of these bills kind of would create or lay the groundwork legally for essentially chaos in our election system that would allow partisan legislatures or partisan election officials to essentially disregard the will of the voters. They do this through a variety of techniques. Like I said, it's this weird kind of hostile, anti-negative creativity. They keep coming up with new ideas and new ways to do things. But people probably remember at the beginning of 2021 when Georgia passed legislation that, amongst other things, really significantly increased the ability of a board that is selected by the partisan state legislature to examine and kind of initiate hostile takeovers of boards of election that they don't like. And the county that immediately drew their gaze was Fulton County, which is the most Democratic and African American county in all of Georgia. So people probably remember that, but not just Georgia. There are a bunch of other states where they've been doing these sort of things. Everything from, now I should say, the number of bills that have passed has been, kind of in lower numbers than the number of bills that have been introduced.
That's good. Silver lining.
Silver lining. What we're going to be monitoring really carefully is after this election, when a lot of state legislatures are going to be, kind of elected, what we're going to be monitoring really carefully is whether or not there's a real change and whether or not they're going to have the kind of wind in their sails and begin enacting more and more pieces of legislation. But we've been seeing some things like bills that would require all ballots be hand counted, which is a like taking election administration back to the horse and buggy era. Right. And it's like it would introduce inaccuracy, partisanship. It would just introduce so many problems into our system to go back to hand counting ballots. As kind of nostalgic as it sounds, it's really not a good idea.
Well, and it's so silly because this is a difference. It's completely different than electronic voting, where you can maybe, have some concerns. This is just electronic reading of paper ballots. And they're deliberately, I think, trying to obscure that fact.
Yeah. I think you put your finger on it, and I think that's so important. Is that it's not everywhere, but almost everywhere, all voting is conducted on a piece of paper, and that piece of paper is maintained, and then it's like scanned into an electronic tabulator. And that's how the votes are counted. But if there's ever any sign of a problem, you go back to the paper and you recount it. Right. And almost every state, they do like before they use the tabulators, they do what's known as logic and accuracy testing every single time to make sure that the machines are properly programmed. And then after the election, they do audits to make sure that the machines properly counted the votes. And then if there's a recount, you pull out all of the paper ballots and you check it out. And, they're like, let's put it this way, since we started using these electronic tabulators, billions and billions of votes have been counted and tabulated and tested and retested and audited all over the place. And the number of errors are so tiny. Yeah. These machines they're good, and we check so much to make sure that they're good. And the hand counting is slow. And it is also very, very inaccurate. I think there have been some studies that have shown that that hand counted tabulations are off by anywhere from 1% to 2%. And given that a lot of races are less than 1% or less than 2%, you're looking at some real errors if we go back to hand counting.
Yeah, again, hey, I mean, they were also complaining that the election results were taking too long and how scary that would be. I mean, hand counting ballots, give me a break. You can do that as a back measure, but as the initial process, it's ridiculous.